Almost there.
Looks like
Okay,
Roger.
you're good to go.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for joining me today. I realize it's a little bit later. I hope everybody's enjoying the nice weather. It's doing something more exciting than this most of the time. So just to recap what our plan was for today, in lieu of our regular meeting, we wanted to try to get feedback from other stakeholders in the town. And as Stacy pointed out, she has sent out to our numerous email lists and boards and committees and whatnot. And as of today, we really hadn't gotten any information. I did send some information to the Rotary, as I mentioned, and Rick Rice, the president of the Rotary, did respond. And I also talked to the Clergy Association. And one of the things Tim Olson had pointed out is that they are starting to have various meetings scheduled in their church. And he didn't really speak to the other churches and whatnot, but they are having various meetings in their basement and whatnot, and they are trying to make that available to any organizations that are trying to meet and still maintain, safe distances and whatnot. Why don't we just go around and because this is going out to everybody and people can kind of meet our committee and what's going on. So why don't we go with the first one in my queue here is Jeff Madden. Can you say hello, Jeff, and your role on this committee?
Hello, my name is Jeff Madden, and I am the Chief of Police with the Thomaston Police Department. And that's about it. There's my introduction.
Representing first responders.
Representing first responders.
All right, next I have Matt. Can you say hello, Matt?
Right. Matt Stankiewicz. I'm the owner of MJM Electric in Thomaston, and also own several properties in town.
And helping represent the trades. Thank you. Steve?
Yeah, Steve Lewis, president of Thomaston Savings Bank, and representing the banks and the financial institutions.
Thank you. Stacy?
Trying to get my my picture up here. I'm sorry, momentarily. Stacy Safchek, Land Use Administrator for the Town of Thomaston and the Economic Development Commission Liaison.
Thank you. Tina?
Tina Malaconi. I'm Director of the Thomaston Food Pantry and representing social services.
Thank you. Jane?
I'm Jane Lanfear, and I'm the owner of Black Rock Tavern in Thomaston. I represent retail in the town.
Thank you. George?
Hi, I'm George LeCapper Jr., President of Unimetal Surface Finishing, and I'm representing the manufacturing community in town.
George and Francine.
Hi, let's see if I can get my video up here. Can you see me now? Okay, I'm Francine Koss. I am the Superintendent of Schools in town. I represent the arm of education.
Excellent. And Kathy is not on yet, right? Okay. So, just a bit of business. I did receive the minutes from the Region 5 COVID team, which I'm going to forward off to everybody after this. But they do have various subcommittees, and I think it may help us get a better idea as to what they're looking for and what kind of conversations they're having. I do know, they're asking about the unmet needs, which kind of brings us to why we're meeting today. Is if any of the stakeholders can bring anything to light as far as what hasn't been done yet. You know, some of the things that they had talked about is, food, rental assistance, childcare, technologies, and things of that nature. And I know we've discussed it a lot before, but this is kind of a public forum, so I thought if there's anything pressing on any of those, and actually, since I said food first, why don't we go to Tina? And Tina, can you speak a little bit to the food pantry and how we're faring through this and how we look going forward?
So right now we are almost exactly where we were with demand last year. Right at the beginning, we had an initial spike. What I think is going to happen is that in September, we're going to have a big increase. Right now, there are a lot of programs still in place for people who generally receive food assistance or might be unemployed. The stimulus checks, if kids get free lunch, everyone, they get, I think, something like $45 a week per kid, backdated to March. That money comes in until school starts. So there's still a lot of other programs out there. And I think as those start to taper off, that we'll see an increase. And I think social services, the same thing. There hasn't been a huge increase in demand with Elizabeth's office, and she's been able to handle a lot of that over the phone. But we're just kind of right now, I don't want to say stockpiling, but we're setting things aside and waiting to see what happens.
And do you or does anyone else have any insight as far as rental assistance and how that's going? I know we don't have a tremendous amount of rental properties in Thomaston, but there's certainly some. Are there any programs that are going to be helping these beyond just saying that the landlords can't evict and whatnot? Is there some sort of assistance coming to these?
I don't think there really is. There might be a few things here, a specific instance where Elizabeth has been able to arrange with the landlord some sort of forbearance, but there are not any large-scale programs for that sort of assistance that are widely available. It's pretty much you just can't throw people out right now.
Yeah, that doesn't help us much in the long term, does it?
Service change.
What's that? Does anyone else have any kind of insight on rentals and rental assistance and whatnot? Steve, have you heard anything?
I know a while back, the governor at the end of June said they were putting out some money to help with rental assistance, but I really don't know how it's been distributed and who it's being distributed from, through. I would think, the towns would be hearing something if it was a widespread program, but it doesn't sound like they've really ironed out that program. And then, of course, the evictions, we still have a little break on that, but that's coming to an end very shortly, unless something comes through on the CARES Act or the governor acts to extend the halt on any evictions. But I agree right now, without the CARES Act being extended or some sort of additional assistance being put in place for rentals, I think when we get into the beginning of September and October, people will start having a lot more difficulties, because I think a lot of people have been using the additional $600 to make up some of the rental payments and mortgage payments.
Does anyone else have anything on that? Stacy, have you heard anything on the town level?
I have not, no.
Yeah, and
My information is the same as everything else everybody else has said.
they've done so much in some areas, and yet for some reason in the rental, the home rentals and whatnot, there really has been very little. And I do suspect that if they don't do something with the CARES Act and whatnot, we're going to have some bigger problems coming up very soon. Anyone else have any experience with that or comment on that? One of the things, and I'm not sure who wants to comment on this, but you're talking about childcare. I do know that, this was a subject that keeps coming up, as people are going back to work, how can they go back to work and have their kids cared for? I know some of the daycares are reopening, but not necessarily fully. Does anyone have any additional information on that?
I have a little information. There are some stipulations on daycares capacity-wise. So that is, even if a daycare in the area wanted to open, they would not necessarily be able to open at full capacity. On the school side, anything that we do, if it can't be supported by a daycare in the area, would cause a conflict for parents. So for example, if we do a half day of school, I know that one of the larger daycare centers in town can't accommodate students until much later in the day. So if we did an early dismissal, there would be no childcare at dismissal time. But if we did a regular dismissal, there would be childcare available. But again, on a limited basis for a limited number of students.
Right. And there's a lot more questions I'll have for you in the near future. The other issue that came up in the minutes I was reading was about technologies, both for kids having computers at home to work on, which I don't think is much of a problem in Thomaston as it might have been in the bigger cities, but also things like having internet access, the ability to do video conferencing, and all of that. And it goes beyond just schools. I think, with people working at home, people trying to exist from a home base, having reliable technologies is key. Does anyone have any insights with that?
I can speak to what we experienced when we did distance learning. We had 2 families in town who required assistance from us. We helped them secure a hotspot. Other than that, I would expect that going into the new year, if we don't get, in the new school year, if we don't get the level of support that we did receive from the local Wi-Fi carriers, if we don't get that again, which was pretty much they opened up all of their Wi-Fi and made it available for public use. If we don't get that, then I do expect that there would be a need for additional hotspots to be provided. I know that there were other suppliers of hotspots, but those that we needed to secure totaled 2.
So I don't fully understand how hotspots work and whatnot. I assume they're proprietary to, like, if you have Optimum, you can go to an Optimum hotspot and whatnot. And if you're signing in, and if you don't have it, you don't have access to the internet. Would people agree, disagree, or have any other comments as far as technologies? Because I'm thinking beyond the schools, like just people even accessing the library was closed, or just curbside pickup. It's been opened up on limited hours. How much does that play into it? We don't have Deb on the line today, but probably something we could follow up on. And is that something we should be noting and saying, if this is continuing, or maybe even if it's not, this is an important thing for Thomaston to have, like this somehow blanket internet access wherever you are in town? Anyone on that?
And Jeff, I guess I'll follow up because we had about 100 employees we sent to remote work, and obviously they had to get connected, throughout different parts of this area. But I think, having free access within the town for all the students, whether it's through a code or something that the town can support, would be very important. I think between the cell phone and the cable carriers and AT&T, they can actually connect probably the entire town and make it accessible to students. And I think, as Francine mentioned, they had done that, I believe, the first few months. They should really be turning that back on, because when you're doing all these Zoom meetings and all this video, you need a lot more bandwidth. And if people are actually paying for bandwidth or have a limited bandwidth, if you don't open it up, it could get expensive, or they're going to have to enhance their plans. So I think that's something that, maybe we could work with the town on, and making sure those cable providers at least give a code to all the students so they have free access. I don't know, Francine, if that would be beneficial for you.
It would be, because one of the things that I think the public overlooks is we may all have access to the internet, but it's not an access point that can be shared as part of the fees that we might pay. So a parent may have a cell phone that allows them to access email and the internet, but in order to make that phone provide that same service to a Chromebook, they have to utilize a personal hotspot, which may or may not be part of their service. And if it isn't, it will be rather costly, because that's when you really start racking up costs for data. So we did have families who were in that predicament, and their children would not be able to access any of the information that they had, because anything that we were sharing in an online format through that Chromebook. And again, for those that aren't familiar with the difference between a Chromebook and any other type of laptop, a Chromebook really houses nothing. It contains nothing. It relies on the internet to access everything. So if you don't have internet access, a Chromebook can be likened to a doorstop. It really doesn't offer much of anything else without the proper connection. So it was opened up in March, late March, and the carriers in the area kept their public Wi-Fi available to families, to anyone, not just to students, but to anyone in town that was within proximity of a Wi-Fi connection device. They were able to get free Wi-Fi through the 15th of June. So it worked out very nicely. If we could get that to happen, even if it's just for a year, just for the school year, because we have such a level of unpredictability for this school year, that would be wonderful. Right now, the most we can offer as a school would be within our four walls. We cannot push out Wi-Fi access through our four walls, because I was seeking to do something like that, most especially at center school, and we cannot do that. We don't have the apparatus for it.
See, the free hotspots that they're doing, are they all equal, or are there some that the signals are either weak, or your width on it doesn't allow you to do as much as you could do on a Chromebook or other device?
So the hotspots that we provided were cellular. So they were connected to, they were a dummy cell phone. And that's how you connected to the internet, was through cellular data. And there was a fee for that. Each hotspot had a fee for the apparatus itself. And then there would be a monthly fee after June 15th if we left them on. I think it was $40 a month per device. So what I'm hoping for, $40 a month, Jeff. We did not have to pay for anything, because we turned off those hotspots on the 15th of June when the free access for those hotspots was turned off. And then all of the free Wi-Fi would be different, Jeff. The Wi-Fi was coming through whatever cable or device that could have been cellular that was nearby in proximity to the home that needed the Wi-Fi access. So that was mostly available to people that lived in the center of town. They would have to be rather close together housing-wise to access their neighbors' Wi-Fi if they were further up the hill where houses are further apart.
Okay, I just heard from Stacy that we did have a question on childcare. Stacy, would you like to share that with us?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. I was just doing one last check of the Google Doc form and just seeing, and we did actually get a question in, an observation in from a resident on Twin Pond Road. There was some specific questions that were added into the doc in terms of, are you or your business currently in need of assistance with a particular reopening concern that the committee and or the town of Thomaston can attempt to assist you with? And the resident said, yes, the local daycares in town have had to severely limit the number of families they can serve. Given that fact, could we look into a partnership with the YMCA or a similar organization? This would give working families an option to accommodate the changing school schedules, especially if Thomaston schools need to move to a hybrid or remote learning model. And that was the full comment.
All right, so I don't have a lot of experience in this. Does anyone have any insights or thoughts on this?
I can speak to that. So the YMCA or any organization who would want to set up a daycare in town would need, of course, a facility for that. About a month ago, the executive director of the Connecticut Rhode Island YMCA network sent a general letter to all superintendents saying, hey, if you want some help, we're going to consider reaching out to all of the towns individually very soon. I haven't heard back from them. However, I cannot offer space in our buildings and be able to disinfect in the duration that is available to disinfect in to clean the building for the next day. So if the town wanted to partner with the Y or any other organization, the town would have to find a place to allow for the daycare to be off-site from a school. Even our staff has to go home immediately at the end of the day. All of our athletes would not be able to re-enter the building because we have to begin disinfecting immediately. With the number of staff we have, that's going to take the full shift.
Does anyone have any other thoughts or ideas on how we might be able to assist with childcare and whatnot? And of course, this is this is going back to the Region 5 in the state as well. So we can basically just make that a note that, hey, Thomaston, like many other towns, is dealing with childcare issues.
Yeah.
But I would love to be able to provide some solutions to that too. Correct.
So would there be a chance to offer a voucher program to parents so that they can go out and find an alternative education system while this is going on? Because this is going to last at least another year. We know it's going to last a year. There's no question there's not going to be a vaccine before a year is over. There's going to be one of two things. It's historically what every virus like this has lived through. So if we said 20% of our population, you can find alternatives through a voucher program, we would probably be way in front of the rest of the state on this. And people will figure out how to educate their kids in an alternative environment, whether it's through homeschooling, through group purchasing and finding their own method of doing this. Not sure if that's been thought of it not at all at this point.
Well, probably Francine could speak to that a little bit more than most of us. I think, one of the issues is that as we reopen and we're saying that people are going back to work and whatnot, how do they go back to work when they can't send their kids to daycare. That becomes one of those roadblocks to going back to work. And as Francine, I don't know if you were on earlier, she was saying, if the school has any kind of abbreviated day or has a shortened day, that also becomes a bigger factor when they're releasing kids, because you can't just let them loose onto the street.
It's a huge factor, Jeff. And so let's use an example, 5 kids, 5 sets of parents. At least they can be pretty much guaranteed that one parent takes them 1 day of those 5 per week, and at least they can be 80% productive and have a definite school pattern for the balance of the year, as opposed to this huge uncertainty that we have out there where working parents don't know what they're going to do, and it creates so much stress. It's so disruptive.
So Francine, I hate to keep calling on you, but you are the person with all the info. Have you done surveying already of Thomaston?
The parents received a survey last month with different levels of how we would respond to COVID. We did that just before we sent the official plan to the state. The state required us to have at least 3 levels of a plan. One would be full distance learning. The other would be some type of a hybrid of distance and or in person. And then the third plan would be in person. And that was sent out along with questions about mask wearing, other types of protections, if there were certain desires that parents wanted to utilize other types of protections beside masks, what would they be considering? Questions about lunch being served. It was a rather long survey, but it did bring a lot of information back to us. There's another survey that will be going out to parents this month, and that will be where they will decide through the Connecticut model. Parents are allowed to opt out or temporarily choose not to participate. That's the language that the state uses. And what that would allow the parents to do would be to keep the children at home. It doesn't exactly address the childcare issue, but it does address the education issue. If a parent does not want the child to return to school in person, but wants to continue with the public school system as the provider of an education, then they would opt out for any duration of time. So until they feel comfortable so that their children can come back in person. The other option is to stay in person. And then the third option would be to do more along the lines of what Rick is describing, which is to choose some other form of education, either a homeschooling where you would have to disenroll from school, or to go to a private school or some other type of educational entity that isn't in town, where again, you'd have to disenroll and enroll in a different school. So right now, those are the options that are out there, and that's what the parents are going to be asked about sometime next week, week after.
All right.
But Francine, wouldn't it be better if we as a school system offered an opt-out for homeschooling at this point, that we pick 1 or 2 options that parents can use, because we know we're going to have a problem. There's not a question if we are or we aren't going to have. So if we as a school system chose an option where parents could opt into public education, but utilizing a proven homeschool method so that they feel safe and comfortable right out of the gate, wouldn't that be a better option than opting out of the public school system and then maybe never coming back again?
So while it sounds good, Rick, the law wouldn't allow it. So if someone did not want to attend school in person, the law would say, typically you have to find another way of attending school by your age, right? There are certain age limitations. You have to start at a certain age and end at a certain age. And if you're not going to public school, you have to prove that you're going to some school. So the only flexibility that the state has given to us so far is that opt-out flexibility, where you don't have to disenroll. You can continue to stay with us in our public school system through distance learning. While kids might be in person, your child could stay home. The other option that you're presenting isn't within the boundaries of the law in Connecticut.
But
I'm not sure if that's correct. I'm not sure if we don't have that option, because we were very willing to have kids distance learn without a program in place. So utilizing a proven program would be much better than not having one at all.
So Rick, I'm going to say that you are wrong. I am correct. There is no other option. The law is what it is. And what's out there, the options are those three. You can either choose your own product or your own private school. You can stay in person with the public school, or you could be online with the public school's distance learning plan. But that's as of this moment. So things change on a regular basis. So things could happen where the governor may make an executive order that includes that kind of a change, or that type of a flexibility, or the commissioner may get the State Board of Ed to provide that type of flexibility. But as of right now, Connecticut General Statute does not allow for a child to claim to be a public school student and not participate in the public school education process. And like I said, the only flexibility is you could stay home if you wanted to, but you have to use your town's distance learning product.
And Francine and Rick, just to be clear, you know, our task here, if you look at the people on here, while Francine is very much a specialist in this area, the rest of us aren't. So we're just collecting this information and providing it to the region, which is going to the state level. The state has asked each town to have a committee like this to look at all these. And so what you're saying, Rick, is noted, and it will be part of our feedback to the region and to the state. Because what Francine's talking about, even, you know, the option of, you know, the stay-at-home option is revolutionary compared to the way it was probably a year ago. So.
Yeah, I find it hard to believe. I find it hard to believe that we could not adopt a proven system of homeschooling as our distance learning program, since obviously the one that was used in the spring didn't work.
I'm sorry, Rick. I need you to be very careful with what you say, because it did work for a majority of our students. So I don't want you to speak disparagingly about anything.
And perhaps you can provide us a copy of the statute, which doesn't allow it. I'm kind of curious.
I will get you that reference, Jeff, so that when you prepare your group response, we can point to the statute that says children must attend school in person, and that flexibility that points to that, or the homeschooling statute as well. That's something I would like to look up right now, but I can't do. I'll have to leave the meeting to do that.
That's
so
okay.
That's you later.
I appreciate your input. And let me just see, do we have any other? So if we can maybe move on a little bit beyond the schools and give you a little bit of a breather, Francine. Maybe we can speak to Steve and the finances of COVID and where we're at with the various mortgages and unemployment and all that fun stuff that's happening.
So Jeff, I'll start first kind of on the Paycheck Protection Program. You know, the big part is it's coming to an end. I mean, we still have people applying now. This past month, we still had people applying at the bank. There's still money available. But I think pretty much everyone who the program worked best for has probably by now utilized it. The bigger question right now, and we're waiting on final guidance on this still, is how to submit the forgiveness application. The rules have changed since day one on this. We're hoping there is actually legislation out there that would say if your loan's $150,000 or less, basically you do a certification and it's approved and it's all done, which would take care of a majority of not only the banks, PPP applicants, but a large percentage of them across the country. It would make the process a lot easier and clean it up, because the way it works now, when all these businesses put in for this forgiveness, the bank has 60 days to review it to make sure, the information's accurate. And then it goes on to the SBA, and the SBA has 90 days to make a decision. So that's 150 days before people find out what they're getting for forgiveness, which is a large amount of time for something that was supposed to be simple, easy, and give some relief to small businesses. And so you're going to put stress on businesses for an additional 150 days. So that's on the PPP. With respect to deferments, we've seen the first round, we had a lot of people, both on the commercial and residential side, put in for deferments, and that's pretty consistent across the board for 90 days. The second time around, for the next 90 days, most businesses have come back, with the exception of those most critically hurt, being we've seen on the, I'll use a gymnasium as an example. We've seen them come back and say, hey, can you help us for another 90 days? Because literally we just opened up and we don't even know how long we can stay open. Some restaurants fared better than others. So some have asked for additional help, others have not. And I think that's kind of across the board. And I think when you talk to George, when you talk even manufacturing, you kind of have that winners, businesses, industries doing very strong. Others related to commercial aviation, I'll use that as an example, that have been just devastated, the loss of revenue and loss of business that's taken place in this very short period of time. On the residential side, it's kind of the same thing. We have, the first 90 days, we had a lot of people who looked for deferments. In the second round, not as many. A lot of people have come back. But I suspect after this next set of 90 days, we're going to have people coming back in if the CARES Act is not put into place, because I think a lot of people have been able to pay because they were getting the additional $600. They got the $1,200. They got all these stimulation checks, these checks that came back to them and enabled them to continue to pay their mortgage and pay their bills. But if that all runs out and they're still unemployed and don't have a place to go for work, we're going to have some issues down the road. So with respect to unemployment, we saw it really bottom out, really get at a high level unemployment. We saw it coming back a little bit, but now we're stalled. And what you're going to see is, and you're already seeing it, you saw it at Stanley Works, you've seen it at Pratt & Whitney, you're going to see it October 1st related to all the airline industries. They're doing massive layoffs. So you're going to see businesses, a little bit of employment come back, but then you're gonna have a whole nother round of people laying people off, people being furloughed. And until business gets back to normal, I don't see that changing. So it's going to be, it's going to be difficult to pull our way out of this, I think. But I'll say one positive note, the real estate market has been unbelievable the past 60 days. The volume of sales we see coming through the bank and in the market, anything that's gone on, the market has been sold, deposits been put down. So that's a little bit of a shining light. We have a lot of New Yorkers coming in and maybe propping up our real estate market a little bit, where prior to this, we didn't have many bright lights in our real estate market. So this is a little bit of a bright light.
So Steve, a quick question, maybe not that quick. When I look at, how all this money was kind of rolled out initially, it seemed like, they were trying to do it really quick and be, as responsive as possible. But it seemed to me there was a lot of backtracking afterwards, or extending the PPP and doing all that. When you look at what could be the next round of PPP or other assistance, or the possible next outbreak or spike, what are the things that we would like to see, especially when it's concerned with banking and finances, and what would we like to see them do better this next time around?
Well, I'll hit two things which I think would be very helpful when they do this next help. Is that I think it's great that they're going to do supplement, people with either 600 or whatever the additional amount they're going to give to people. I would hope they would actually allocate that towards housing and pay rent or pay housing rather than just give someone additional $600 that they can spend as they want. Tell them that we'll give you this additional funding, but we need it to go back to keep, especially rent. Because if they're not paying rent, the landlord's not collecting the money, and that's going to cause the landlord, it's going to just keep going down the chain. So if they're putting money back in, it really should be a housing assistance allowance to keep people in their homes to support the real estate market, not only for people who own homes, but for rental assistance. So that I think would be a huge thing. It would help all our landlords. It help people, it cover a lot of things, because if you don't, you'll lead to a housing crisis, you'll lead to homelessness, and have a lot of other issues. So I think that's a first place. And then you don't have to worry about evictions, because if you're giving a housing allowance and people are applying that to their mortgages, they're just going to stay current. Second thing, I think, when they roll out, I think they're going to have to do something for some small businesses. And I'm just hoping that the guidance is clear on the front end and they don't make this panic and rush like they did last time around. And lay out the expectations in the beginning and not change things around. I think they have after this PPP experience, I think they have some lessons they've learned. I think they've improved the systems. So I'm hoping that they can, continue to run this type of program out, but really try to identify maybe specific industries and specific companies that really need it. Because there's companies that got the money that probably thought they may have needed the money, but they did not. And they've benefited. And then others who, I think there's some on the line right now that could still use some assistance, because I bet you their businesses are running at 50 or 60% of normal and barely covering fixed cost. And, we need to continue to support them until the economy kind of gets chugging again, because the last thing a bank wants and the business and the government wants is these people to go out of business, because that's going to leave vacant real estate. That's going to leave unemployed people. And it's less expensive to, I think, give a little bit of assistance to some of these people who have their sales adversely impacted until things get going again.
Thank you, Steve. For those of you, if you haven't noticed, Francine has put a couple of links in the chat column with the statues and I think the school is reopening a website, so if you get a chance to click on those. I did want to welcome Kathy to our mix. I see you there. And Steve was just talking about real estate. If you wanted to maybe chime in a little bit more on that, Kathy, because maybe you were just selling a house.
Sure. Steve is correct about the real estate booming. It's incredible how quickly a house will go on the market and then it's under deposit within sometimes hours or a day or two. And even the condos, just all different houses are just selling so quickly. And it's bringing up the values, because people are outbidding each other and they're paying more than what the list price is. So it is incredible how quickly it's started. And it has been, like Steve said, the last few months.
Is that
it's incredible.
A lot of out-of-state buyers too?
There are quite a few out-of-state buyers and then local people who are trying to buy, but it sometimes makes it difficult because it's so competitive. But it is.
Do you or anyone else feel that this could also be a problem for us as we move forward? Are we pricing our own residents out of their homes and running up rental prices at a time when people can't afford rent?
That's a good question. It could possibly affect that. I know that some of the people that have had appraisals done they can't match the appraisal, so they have to compromise a little bit on the offer, and they meet in the middle. But it's definitely brought sales prices up.
So we haven't heard much from George LeCapra yet today. George, how are you doing down on South Main Street?
Not bad. I'll just jump on that, what Kathy said. I mean, I think commercial real estate is probably next in line to take a big hit. I only say that, because I think that what larger companies who have multiple locations are starting to realize is that, you know, remote work for a lot of their employees is just as, or if not more productive than being in the office. So I think especially in New York, you're going to see a lot of, and it's already starting to happen, a lot of that commercial real estate open up, driving down property values there. And you're already seeing, you know, restaurant franchises in different type of franchises pulling out of malls and not renewing their rents and stuff. So I think it's long term, the commercial real estate will be a problem, and that's only going to grow with this happening. So I just wanted to add that my 2 cents on that. I'll get into the manufacturing aspect of it. You know, speaking to the local manufacturers that I've spoke to in town, all of them have taken advantage of the PPP. Steve mentioned the CARES Act. I think, you know, like myself, we took the PPP early in April and, you know, used it to keep our staff busy. And so that ended in June, like most of the manufacturers in town. And so I'm not sure the business volumes for us and for most in town range from being down 30% to 70%, depending on the industry. And the only programs that are continually busy are the medical programs. So I'm not sure. I talked to one today, and they said they could probably last another 6 months if there's not another something in the CARES Act that could support manufacturing to continue along with the level of business that we're having right now. So it's a little scary. We have seen a little bit of an uptick. A couple of the manufacturers are closed Fridays in town. We are still closed on Fridays, although we are starting to do some production on Fridays and on a limited basis. And so we think that in September, we'll probably get back to full-time, a full work week, if everything continues on the path. But it's hiring has been a challenge. You know, we're starting to bring people back, but we're finding out that that everyone knows it's sometimes it's more profitable to stay home given the stimulus. So when we're going out to hiring, we're just not finding the pool of people. Never mind the talent, you're not finding the numbers that you need to fill spots for people that haven't come back. And so, although the CARES Act would help, I just think that they have to be careful about the amount of stimulus they're going to give moving forward. Because if I think they give the 600 stimulus again, I think it's going to bode a big problem for employers that are starting to get busy and looking to meet demand. I'd like to see it at 70 or 80% of you know, what someone should be making on a normal week. So there is some incentive to come back to work. And so those are, I think, the challenges that the manufacturing community in town is facing. And I think, you know, although there has been an uptick, certainly people and companies are in distress. And so we'll see how long it's going to continue to last.
Would you say, though, going back to what I was asking Steve, when it comes to PPP money, if you did it early on, you didn't have as much of a window to spend it in as they started expanding it later. Would you have handled your PPP money differently had they come out with the full rules at the beginning?
That's a good question. I probably wouldn't have. When they brought the new rules out, I was already 6 weeks into it. It didn't make sense at that point to change from the 8-week to the 24-week. I don't think I would have. I think they did that more, Jeff, for people who weren't open yet. You know, a lot of people opened later, and so they gave them the opportunity to use it a little later. So I think for me, I wouldn't have changed. I think they opened that window up for people who got the money early and still hadn't opened because they didn't anticipate being closed for that long.
We haven't heard much from Matt yet today. Matt, you want to give us a little update on the trades and what's going on there?
Well, we're, I think we're busy at this point because our seasonal work has picked up. What I do see from the bidding perspective, all of the bidding that we're doing, we're sending out the bids and we're not getting any feedback. We work on the national level, we work for a company called SAI, building charging stations and cellular work. And all of that work seems to be delayed. Based on, they have protocols in place that we can only have so many people on job sites, and they've spread the work out, but it hasn't kept us very busy. The PPP money, you asked George if he would have spent the money differently. I think I would have spent the money differently, knowing that it was going to be extended to 24 weeks, because we were advised from our accountant to try to use that money to keep employees busy. So we were keeping them busy doing odd jobs, keeping them busy when we could have extended that time. So we could have shortened our work week. We could have extended that money out the full 24 weeks if we had a plan, but we ended up trying to use it as much as we could. So we kept guys busy full time when we probably could have shortened the work week and extended that money. So I'm hoping that, a lot of these projects that we have bid on, because I have a lot in the hopper, that they come in, and then we should be fine going into the end of the year. But there's a level of uncertainty. We just don't know right now. So.
Yeah. And so with me, and I'm with you, Matt. We received PPP money here at the theater, and obviously we're still closed. But we kept people employed for a certain period of time because we thought, oh, this is only going to be a month or two and we'll be good. And of course, it's now looking at 6 months looming, and we probably would have done the shared work program or something else where we could have spread that PPP money out much further, and we didn't. So be it. But I am hoping, and maybe we can make these recommendations as our committee, that, and whether anyone listens or not, I don't know, but that get it right the first time, the next time they go out, try to have all this stuff in place. They know they may have to do this, so that it's not going to be urgent to roll it out. So get it right. All right. And I guess I'm going to, well, no, actually, let's go to Jane first. We haven't heard that much from Jane. Let's get an update on the restaurants and what you would like to see from restaurants, and what they're doing right and doing wrong as far as getting the restaurants reopened.
I think what's happening is many restaurants are at the 50% mark that are open for business. There are some retail places in town that haven't opened, mostly due to their size. So for instance, Milestone is doing takeout, but hasn't brought people into the restaurant itself, because if you're bringing people in, you have to hire front of the house staff, you have to hire dishwashers, there are other people you have to employ. So I think it runs the gamut in Thomaston. I mean, we are opened outside, we are open inside. We are doing catering offsite. We're doing as much as we can, but we still are at the 55, 60% level of where we were prior to COVID. And I think restaurants are going to continue to struggle, unfortunately, because everything you see in the news and are saying one of the 5 elements is don't go to bars and restaurants. So it used to be just bars, but now the phrase is bars and restaurants. And so I think people who are afraid or people who have some type of medical condition are tending to stay home. They're still doing takeout. But I think the restaurant industry certainly is going to continue to struggle through this. So, you know, I look constantly of what is going to be the next layer of help for this industry, because it really has taken a huge hit at this point. People are coming out. It's not like we don't have business, we do. But again, there are people that will only eat outside. There are other people who want to eat inside, but they want a separate location where there is enough space between the tables, and they are at 6 feet, but in some cases, they'll want to eat in a separate dining room, which is fine with us. We'll take all the business we can get at this point. But I think we will continue to struggle through the end of the year, and hopefully we can get more help if needed.
Do you see anything that could have been done differently as far as working with the restaurants and the regulations that are being put on them? If this comes back again, what are the things that worked? What are the things that didn't work? And maybe we should be.
Well, I think it's interesting because last week we were part of the COVID process with the governor's orders and, getting the badge on the window and everything, and wearing the gloves and wearing the masks. And then we're told last week we don't have to wear gloves anymore. So again, when the rules change, I'm not really understanding that. I think it has to do with contamination. However, everyone is touching everything. So I think we need more information about transmission on surfaces. I think that would be helpful to us as we move forward. We do keep all of the records with our staff of who is working that day in case we have a case within our restaurant who worked that day, and they can contact trace from there. I've had several employees who I have asked not to work for 2 weeks and collect unemployment because either they knew someone close to them who had COVID, or they did not feel well. And so I have to ask them not to come in. So then they have to file for unemployment again, which is their right to do. Or they take their sick time, which is their right to do. But I think there are a lot of small issues that we're going to have to hurdle through, probably for the next year.
You know what I like meeting with all you guys is you come up with some good ideas. And what I was just hearing from you is, the public health information angle of it. And while there's news conferences all the time, they don't really burrow down specifically for restaurants or theaters or whatever the case may be. And I'm wondering if that might be something we could ask for. And as we move forward, is there a way to have more town hall meetings and things of this nature where it's simply sharing best practices and information and updates on why you are wearing gloves and now we're not, and things like that? Because we seem to collect a lot of this stuff on what we're supposed to do, but then they change it and people are still doing the other stuff. It's like the N95 masks. They don't work anymore. So apparently they did at one point, but they don't now. So I think maybe that's a note that I'll have, is that we should try to have some public information meetings where it's strictly to get people updated on each industry and what needs to be done. Let's see, who else have we not heard from? I guess, so I will just talk about, because I'm waiting for phase 3, like bars and other attractions. The theater is really phase 3, so we're waiting to hear about reopening here. And while we want to get busy again, I'm not all that anxious to have 400 people sitting in the theater, although that'd be great ticket-wise, but as far as health-wise, it isn't. So we're expecting them to come back with figures to say that maybe we can be at 25 to 35% capacity in the theater and spreading them out in a reasonable manner. But our other concern is having performers on stage and being able to have them perform safely, because we have like one dressing room downstairs and a couple of changing areas. If you have a cast of 30 people, they're not separating. And then once they're on stage, they're dancing together, singing together, fighting together, doing whatever. You're not doing the separations there. So testing is going to be really important, and making sure that we're doing shows that have small casts and probably not singing for the time being. So that's really kind of where we're looking to go going forward. And I think I speak for a lot of the arts organizations that are saying, if we can get to phase 3, if they can just say, okay, you can start opening your doors, but these are the limitations, we can figure it out from there. But we can't figure it out until they say, here's a green light, and here are the things that you have to do. Like the restaurants, you can open up at 50% capacity, but you have to do A, B, and C. And that's kind of where we're at as well. So we're at just about an hour here. We've covered a lot of information. Did anyone on our panel have anything that they wanted to bring forward at this meeting, or they can wait until the next one? I see we also have maybe one or two other people on as guests. If anyone, I don't think there were any additional comments written in from us, right, Stacy? I see you shaking your head, so, okay. And
Hey, Jeff.
yes.
How is it that Lake Compounce, Lake Quassapog are opening? Dodge Stadium is having rock concerts at it. How is that possible when we're trying to still social distance?
They like them better than me?
I don't understand it. I don't understand why we're gonna.
Well, I'm no expert, Rick. The only thing I can gather from that is when they're doing outdoor events, that the transmission rate outdoors isn't nearly as high as indoors. But I don't know. I wish I had an outdoor venue right now. So,
have you been in Dodge Stadium or the Rock Cat Stadium or?
I've been to Rock Cats and whatnot. Yeah, I don't know how they're doing it. I know Ridgefield Players has been doing concerts outdoors, and there was a Shakespeare Festival in Stanford, and it's severely limited, where they would normally have 400 to 500 people in this field for the Shakespeare Festival. I think they were limited to 100, and they had to have 15-foot separations between all of the blankets.
So Jeff, just so you know, Dodge Stadium, unlimited capacity, they can fill the whole thing up. And their only caveat is you must wear masks unless you're eating or drinking.
And if you're there, you're eating and drinking.
Exactly. Yeah.
Rick, I'm not going to pretend that I understand anything beyond my little world here. So, but that's where we're at. We're trying to look at Thomaston, keep it as whole as possible, and get it reopened the best we can, and give feedback to the region, into the state, which hopefully goes up to the federal level as well. But I thank everybody for attending today. Just over an hour. I try to keep these meetings as brief as possible. Thank you for your participation. Just as a note, Stacy, because we skipped last week around this week, and I just asked the people on the committee, are we good with waiting 2 weeks and then meeting, or do we want to wait? I'm not around next week. I don't see much point in having a meeting next week. So we can either do it in 2 weeks, or we can get back on our schedule in 3 weeks. Anybody want to just come in and say 2 or 3? Jane?
3. I'm on vacation the next 2 weeks.
Perfect. Fancy.
I'm available either way, but to support one of my other committee members, I'll say 3.
Thank you, Fran.
Steve,
3.
George, 3. Steve?
He sounds good to me.
Okay. Jeff?
3,
Great. All right.
I'll
Yeah,
go with
works
3.
for me also.
Excellent. I'll see you guys in 3 weeks then. Thank you very much.
Perfect.
Okay,
Thank you.
take care, everybody.
Stacey.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thanks,
Be
Stacy.
safe.
Thank
Bye.
you, Stacy, for setting this up.
No problem.